Hi, Sandra here, the Misophonia therapist. And today's question is, can I just get used to misophonia? To the point where I simply do not notice it much anymore. Now, this getting used to a stimuli is called habituation. So can you habituate to misophonia? And some people can, some people do. I've seen it happen. And habituation is simply a process that our brains use to filter out what it thinks is not important. So when I speak to new clients who come to see me for help with their misophonia, they are often so focused on it, so focused on the triggers. The misophonia has become the focal point of their lives and the misery that it causes, which of course can be draining, exhausting, and very limiting because it restricts them in what they are able to do. An avoidance of those triggers then becomes the number one priority, and the client finds that they will do everything in their power to not be triggered, which can of course mean avoiding situations that otherwise might be enjoyable or essential for their future development. So when a problem is given this much attention, it has a tendency to grow. I've worked a lot with a condition called tinnitus, which is when you hear sounds in your ear that are created by the brain rather than coming from the environment. And typically it could be ringing or hissing or whistling. And many people with this condition can learn to ignore it through the habituation process, but some are less lucky. They might attach too much significance to it and try to fight it too much, which of course is impossible because it comes from within. And it's a little bit like trying to run away from your own shadow. So how can we habituate? Is it even possible for a condition like misophonia? And of course, there are various therapies, including exposure therapy, which tends to work on the assumption that the more you are exposed to a stimuli, the more likely it is that you will eventually just filter it out and not notice it anymore. But this can sometimes produce the complete opposite effect in some people. And it's important to remember that the habituation process is something that the brain will do very naturally when it realizes that whatever the stimuli is has no importance attached to it, principally whether it's a risk. So repeated exposure might not achieve that goal for some people, and habituation is more likely to occur when the stimuli just gets lost amidst other stimuli that the brain considers are more important. So my tip here, what I take from this, is that for people with misophonia, it might be helpful to switch focus onto the times when they are less likely to notice being triggered. So for even in situations where they are usually triggered, what tends to be different? For example, are you busy, happy, relaxed, fulfilled, well rested, or not worried about other things? How can you start to shift your focus? This does take time and it does take patience. Misophonia is complex, but it appears in some people to be almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You expect to hear the sound and you get anxious. You hear the sound and you do get anxious. The anxiety ramps up. You start to get anxious whenever you think about the situation or the person. You start to avoid those situations or people. Your primary focus becomes the anxiety and how awful it is and how much you do not want it. But this creates yet more anxiety and more likelihood that you will be affected by the trigger. even if it really didn't bother you that much before, and you are just hyper-focused on it. So it will become impossible then to habituate because the brain is giving it too much attention. Habituation happens naturally when your brain considers something to be unimportant. And that is the stage that you want to reach. And I hope that's been helpful. I am going to do some more content about this, so keep tuned. And thank you. I'll be back tomorrow with more content. Bye for now.